Okay, it looks like we've had a few more people join us, and it's 12:01, so I would like to get started. Thanks, everybody, for joining the BCMA's first webinar of 2018. This is our 9th webinar of our series in total, and today we're going to be talking about writing your own fundraising plan. My name is Ben Fast, and I am the Programs and Member Services Coordinator for the BC Museums Association. That's a picture of me if you don't know what I look like. I'm here to help you. Send me any technical questions if you have any. You can send it by email with my email there, or you can send them through the chat function. And I did post something in the chat earlier, and we'll practice that out in a few minutes. But before we begin, I just thought I would play a quick video that we created last week. This video is in response to the McDonald's Canada ad campaign that you may have heard about, and we hope it will inspire you to advocate for museums in your community. And I just realized that to do it, I need to really quickly drop out of my screen share here, so hold on 1 second, and we'll be right back with you. All right, just pulling things up. We should be back and ready to go now. Hi, I'm Ben, and I'm from the BC Museums Association. This week, a Canadian fast food chain produced an ad that suggested $5 spent at a museum didn't get you as much as $5 spent at their restaurant. The ad campaign has been pulled, and we thank them for that. But it got me thinking, what could my $5 get me at some of the museums and galleries in my community? Let's go find out. I can learn about saving the environment. I can learn about indigenous cultures. I can see how people lived 100 years ago. In a castle! I can see 20 Emily Carr paintings, and it's only the first gallery. I can even learn to draw. I can even meet my friends at the gallery. Hey guys! It seems my $5 actually gets me a lot at a museum. So why don't you go out to your local museum, art gallery, heritage site, or other cultural organization and see what your $5 can get you. Thanks for watching, and see you at the museum. As you can tell, we spent about $5 on making it as well. But I wanted to highlight that in part because it was a really fun video to make, and it was a fun thing for us to be a part of, but also because Cassie Holcomb, who we will be having in a few minutes here, she was a part of that video very briefly. You may have seen her jump in at the Bateman Center there, so thanks very much to Cassie. But we'll get to her in a second, but first I just... Hi, I'm Ben. Again, what am I doing? Here we go. I just wanted to show you how to use this webinar. So if you're reading this, you're already doing great. I see there's a whole bunch of people that have signed on already. But if you're yelling at the computer or laughing along with the video, we can't hear you. We also can't see you, so stop waving. You can use the chat feature instead, and just make sure that you click all panelists and attendees to ask your questions or make comments, and we will read them out. So there's a little drop-down menu in the chat function. And why don't we give that a quick try? If you wanted to go onto the chat window and see if anybody can type maybe where they're from, where they're joining us from today, that would be great. And see if anybody can sign on. This will be a useful thing. Kelly's first one in with Port Coquitlam. This will be useful as Cassie will be asking a couple questions through the course of the webinar as well, so it's a great opportunity for you to respond to the questions as well as to ask your own questions at the end. Looks like people are getting it. This is great. We got people from all over: Vancouver Police Museum, Kelowna, White Rock, Vancouver, Mackenzie. That's good. I have two special guests joining us today we'll get to in a second. Looks like it's sunny in Surrey. That's great to hear. It's sunny in Victoria as well. As to everybody else in BC and seemingly everywhere else in North America, we are sorry that we have sun and flowers poking up already. But I also did want to do a really exciting announcement. This is our first webinar with people joining us from outside BC, and we have two people joining us from Idaho, from the Museum of Northern Idaho. And so I just decided to throw this little GIF in. I understand that this is a very famous mascot in Idaho, where, of course, there are very famous potatoes, and this is probably the most famous one of them all. So thank you very much for finding us, for joining us, for signing in early as well. And we hope that you enjoy the BCMA webinars and that you come back for the next one after this, although there's no guarantee of dancing potatoes after that. Okay, on with the webinar. So we're starting off 2018 with a webinar on fundraising because let's face it, we all need money. And what is your fundraising plan like to start this year? Do you just hope to be walking out under a window as a baby like this tosses bills out a window? How can you get your message across effectively and without too much effort so you can plan for the future, but do it without sounding demanding or desperate? Today, Cassie will help you go from this, maybe not quite this, to being more like having people respond this way. Shut up and take my money so that you can be like this. Or maybe even like this. But that could just be hoping. Cassie can do it. Let's get us $1 million, and Cassie will join us today. I'm just going to get her on the call here. Hi, Cassie.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
Yeah, well, glad to have you here. Cassie is at the Robert Bateman Center, and I like the sort of the way that she came into this field. She really is a science geek turned cultural worker. She did her biology degree at the University of Victoria and then worked at the Center of the Universe, and I mean that literally. She worked at the National Research Council's Center of the Universe Visitor Center doing science education programs, and then moved on from there into nonprofit management and fundraising and audience development, membership management, all of that sort of stuff. So Cassie is joining us today as the Manager of Engagement and Development at the Bateman Foundation. She works just around the corner from us here at the BCMA at the Robert Bateman Center. And so Cassie, I would like to throw it on to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me for the webinar. I'm really excited. We have so many participants today, and hopefully some interest in growing your fundraising program, and in particular, writing a plan that's going to be able to send you through 2018. Just as an introduction, I know you're all using your chat function. We all took a turn at that. So I'd love to be able to find out a couple of things from you while I do a shameless plug about where I work. I'd love to find out if you have a dedicated fundraiser at your cultural center, and how many of you have written your own fundraising plan before? And while you're doing that, as I said, I'm going to give you a shameless plug for the Bateman Foundation. As Ben mentioned, I've been with the Bateman Foundation coming up on 3 years now. The Bateman Foundation is an organization that connects people of all ages to nature through the art of Robert Bateman. And one of our very first initiatives was the Robert Bateman Center, which is a museum in downtown Victoria. And we have over 80 pieces of Robert Bateman's work at the center, as well as we have a temporary rotating exhibit gallery where we bring in other artists who have a nature-like theme to them. So coming up this year, we have some fantastic exhibits. We have one called Bateman's Beginnings, talking about Robert Bateman's start in art and some of the different styles he moved through. We have another exhibit coming up in the summer with 7 artists from Haida Gwaii talking about a trip and an encounter that they had with a lost totem pole. And then at the end of the year, we'll be having a poetry exhibit with Victoria's Poet Laureate, Yvonne Blommer, and she'll be responding to certain nature pieces, and should be quite fun. So we do that. We also do a bunch of different activities outside, like Nature Sketch. You can see the little girl. We take kids outside and we actually get them sketching in nature. And the gentleman in the very high-tech looking glasses is actually Robert Bateman. We have a virtual reality that's launching in the Victoria Film Fest this February. You can see that if you're in Victoria at the Bay Center, and then we'll have it on a regular basis downtown Victoria at the Robert Bateman Center. So definitely, please come in and see us if you find yourself in Victoria. We'd love to show you around. So Ben, are you getting any answers to my questions?
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few. We've gotten a few that say nope. Can you hear me, Cassie?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm getting a little notification saying I can't be heard, but hopefully everybody can hear me. So we're getting nope. We're getting we have a fundraising committee, no formal plan yet. That's from Kelly and Port Coquitlam. Tammy from Crescent says we only have 2 staff people. We don't have a dedicated anything. I think that's probably a pretty common thing.
That sounds very common in the cultural sector.
Yeah, we're getting quite a bit of sort of no dedicated person. Some people that do may not have a plan currently, but they are looking at people. Grand Forks Art Gallery mentions we do not have a dedicated fundraiser, but also not a specific plan. There are longstanding fundraisers that get rolled out every year. Those sorts of things.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good to hear. I know there's a lot of places don't have the luxury of having a dedicated fundraiser. We're pretty lucky where we're at. So hopefully what we'll be able to do today is give you a template, and Ben will be able to send some information afterwards that'll get you starting to think about your fundraising plan and what that's going to look like for 2018. What are the things that you're going to do to be able to help you reach your goals? And how are you going to do them? Who are going to be the people that are going to do that for you? If you don't have a dedicated fundraiser, who are you going to be able to utilize to make your goals happen? So a fundraising plan, to me, it's a little bit like a treasure map, like we see here. For me, it's my roadmap for the year. It's definitely a fluid document. There's always something that's going to come up that is going to cause your fundraising plan to change, or you're going to have to add something or delete something. But it is good to kind of look at the year and set out your resources very carefully, and especially in smaller organizations, to know just what you're capable of for producing for the year. I should mention, Ben gave me a little bit of an introduction. I definitely have a background in memberships and grants, so I'm a little bit biased towards those, and you'll see that coming up. But I did want to touch on all the different aspects of fundraising as well, so you'll see that as we move along. So as I mentioned, your fundraising plan, it's good to get a good sense of what needs to be accomplished and really by who. And for those of you who have boards, it's a really great thing to take to your board or your fundraising committee to say, you guys, this is what we need to get done for the year, and this is where I need help to make that happen. What we're not going to look at today is capital campaigns. This is really what I would call your annual campaign, all the things that make up the money that you need for your operations for the year. So what are the components of your plan? It's definitely a bit of a recipe. What we're going to go through each of these components as we move along. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a set mission and vision. That's very clear. What are the values of your organization, and what are your plans for the coming year? And that would be your 2018 goal. What do you need to accomplish? What are the channels that you're going to use? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but what are the different ways you're going to get your message out there? And specifically, what are the tactics that you're going to use to meet your goals for the year? Are you going to do that through your membership programs, through grants, major donors, informal giving, appeals and campaigns, events or sponsorships? For most of it, it's probably going to be a compilation of all of those different events, different tactics. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about stewardship and cultivation, because that's very important, and also recognition. How are you going to recognize these donors? So starting out, definitely, as I mentioned, you want to have a very clear mission and vision. Do most of you actually, this is a question that we can send out there, are most of you in your organizations fairly firm with your mission and vision? Are they fairly set in place, or do some of you need some work in that? And that's something that you can identify before you move on your fundraising plan. So always keep your current mission and vision in mind, and you can tie your fundraising priorities to that. If someone wants to fundraise for something that's way outside your vision and mission, you're not going to do that this year. You're tied directly to those priorities, to your mission and vision. And what you can do based on your mission and vision is you can create a case for support. And that's a nice little document to have. It doesn't need to be fairly extensive, but it is something that you can use when you're talking to donors or corporations for sponsors, that really sets out what your organization is all about what value you're bringing to the community, and how your supporters can help you.
And I would say, Cassie, that most of the people responding say they've got a pretty clear view of what their vision and mission is. But there's a few people that are saying it needs a bit of clarification, or it's sort of been liberally interpreted. But that's usually a good sign that most people have that.
Absolutely. That's a very good sign. And it's also a good sign to take a look at it. I know sometimes an organization can literally drift over the years, and you're stuck with a mission and vision from 10 years ago that isn't valid anymore. So always as a starting place, it's a really great place to start for your fundraising plan. The next place you want to head to is to start looking at your 2018 goals. And you want to make sure that your goals are tied to your budget and make sense. But you also want to make sure that they're attainable for you as well. I would love to have a goal of making $300 million this year through fundraising. That's probably not going to happen for me. So I need to look at what my budget is, where our operating funds are going to, how much do I need to cover that, and how much of that is going to be covered by fundraising. Sometimes it'll be covered by other activities that you're doing, gift shop or attendance, but I know for a lot of our organizations, it's the fundraising that covers the burden of the rest of that operating funds, and operating funds are hard to come by. So definitely take a look at what the goals and priorities are for 2018. And again, make sure that they're SMART goals, as you probably have all heard of. They're relatively realistic and they're measurable. And remember that the goals should be tied, don't have to be tied to the revenue. So when it comes to fundraising, we always think about we need X number of dollars for this, but there could be other fundraising goals that you have, like establishing a fundraising committee or establishing your policies and procedures around fundraising. Those are really great goals to have, and you can include those in your plan for the year. I think it's always really good to include your board. I always love to have fundraising targets for my board. They're may not be the most popular thing, but I think making sure that your board is online with your fundraising is a really important thing, especially for those organizations that don't have a dedicated fundraiser. Having board members being involved in fundraising, having them know that they have an expectation of raising a certain amount of money per year is never a bad thing. So we'll get you typing again. Just before we head into the fundraising tactics in your plan, we want to talk a little bit about channels. There are different channels that you can use to get the word out or to fundraise. And I thought we could have you brainstorm some channels in the chat function. So I'll give you a second or two to maybe come up with some of the channels that you might be using for fundraising. These are ways that you're going to get your message out there. So I'll start us off. One of the channels that we use quite extensively at the Robert Bateman Center and the Bateman Foundation is social media. We have a social media plan, and it touches all aspects of the organization, but it definitely, I use it for fundraising quite often because we have a really captive audience on our social media.
And Cassie, maybe as people are typing, you can answer this question from Tammy.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were talking about getting the board to do it, she wrote in, how do you get them to actually do it, though?
That is a good question. I think when you're onboarding board members, I think expectations are realistic, are a really important thing to do. So when we would like to onboard a board member, we make sure that it's known that they have a certain amount of money or expectation to raise money as part of their job description with the board. So that there's no, at least they know what the expectation is coming in. It's a little harder with established board members. I always try to get our board members to do something a little gentle just to start out with. So you can have them do a membership fundraising drive. That way, try to get members. The cost price point usually for memberships is fairly low, so you can make it a little competition. But always try to bring in the culture, always try to get them asking and have them go out with you. I think fundraising in duos is a great way to talk to certain people, and we'll be talking about major donors in a little bit. But talking in a duo and bringing a board member along and making them see that it's not a scary thing, it's actually a really hopeful and uplifting thing to go out and talk to people.
Right. Okay. Well, some of the responses coming in, a lot of them are social media, newsletters, letters, sort of direct mail stuff. Some people are going to media, so local newspaper or radio. We have one person from Wells saying that they're an isolated community, but a tight community, so people come out to support each other, which I think is a lucky thing. We're also getting some that are saying like book sales and community awareness opportunities, even just phone calls, getting on the phone and calling people, many community events, that sort of thing.
Those are perfect. Those are all fantastic channels that you can use to get out there. Any way that you can connect with people. As I heard, you can do mailings, you can do phone calls, you can have events. There's lots of different channels that you can get your message out there. So we'll move on to tactics, and as I'm a big hockey fan, this is my nice hockey graphic that I was able to add to the presentation. The tactics are how we're going to achieve those goals. So we've established that we're going to have goals in 2018. They're tied to our mission and vision. These are the tactics that are going to move us forward, and we're going to use the channels that we just identified in the last slide to do that. So I have a few channels to go through, and as I mentioned in the plan, a few tactics to go through, and as I mentioned, I am definitely a membership person. That's how I started out in fundraising, was with being a specialist in memberships. So I'm definitely keen on memberships, and as some of the people from my organization are listening, they hear me harp about memberships all the time. So for me, it's always great to have a membership plan as well, kind of in addition or as an addendum to your fundraising plan. How are you going to be selling your memberships? Memberships, I always say, are a philanthropic ask, and many people sell memberships as benefit-based. And benefits are definitely part of your membership. Your annual passes to your different organizations is a huge perk for our members out there. But I do believe people become a member and get involved with an organization really to speak to the organization and to become part of our community. So I find membership a really good core program. If you don't have a membership program, I would definitely consider it. It's a great way to create a wonderful base of community-minded people who can become your donors. They could potentially become your volunteers. They can go to your events, and they're really, really wanting to be involved with your organization. So for me, all staff and volunteers should be comfortable in talking about memberships. And as I mentioned before, you can do little membership initiatives, definitely with your frontline staff or your board members. We don't do a contest to see who can sell the most memberships in our organization, but we definitely, for every membership that you sell, you get a draw, an entry in a draw to win some prizes every quarter. And it's a little fun little competition. It's a little incentive. It keeps memberships at the front of mind. And it's definitely a great way for your frontline staff and everyone else to keep memberships out there to the public. You can also do promos. I know the RBCM, they do buy one, get one free promo in November with their memberships. We do half off with our memberships in December. So it's a good way to boost your membership numbers. And as I mentioned, it really is a gateway. So you can generate a fair amount of revenue off of memberships, but it's really what's going to happen to those members afterwards. If you're stewarding and talking to those memberships, they're going to learn about what you're doing and what you're offering to the community. And you never know, they might leave you a bequest down the road. So there's definitely an advantage to a membership program. I did read, there's a great little blog called Know Your Bone by a woman named Colleen, who was talking about memberships a couple weeks ago. And just a point, just something to bring up. Make sure that you're recognizing your members when they walk in the door. They definitely seem to want to be recognized. I guess a lot of members feel that they're constantly getting asked for things like money and not getting recognized when they show up on site at your organization. So definitely make sure that you're talking to your members and thanking them for being members and showing them all what their memberships are doing. The second tactic that we have for meeting our 2018 goals are grants. And I'm sure probably all of you have grants sitting on the side of your desk right now, applying for different things around your projects. There is definitely a movement in grants away from operational funding towards project funding, and we see that quite a bit. With gaming, gaming grants in British Columbia are one of the only grants that are out there that'll give you money for your operational funds. So for us at my organization, we try to, when we're looking at our goals for the coming year, we try to really focus our grants on projects, and operational funds will try to cover other ways, whether that's through gift shop admissions or gift shop revenue and admissions, that sort of thing. And we try to keep the grants really focused on projects. And then that way you can take a project and grow it. You have the seed money and move it forward. When you're writing your grants, I would suggest that you really be specific and write for each agency. There's different kinds of language that you're going to use for a government application than you're going to use for, say, TELUS. So really cater the language that you're using, and remember also to keep your reporting stats in mind. Know that you're going to have to report out eventually from a grant as well. But the big question about grants I always find is what to apply for, because there's a ton of them out there and all of us don't have a lot of time to do that. So one of the tools I'm going to send you with is a grant matrix today. And this is a way of kind of prioritizing which of the grants fit the best with your projects and what you can go out and apply for. So as I mentioned, we'll send this out afterwards, but it'll hopefully help you avoid the mission drift problem where you're making up a project just because you want to apply for a grant because you want that little bit of administration money. So what you can do, I'll just show you a little bit of the granting matrix, and it should pop up. It's not popping up, Ben. I'll just show you this right here. It's basically a way of going through and seeing if the grants that you're trying to apply for do tie to your plan, to your strategic plan. Does it apply to the mission and vision? And making sure that you can get it done in a reasonable time, and that you have the support of your executive director or your board as well. So we'll head into major donors. This is a big part of your fundraising plan and something that you'll need to plan for the year. I do wish that rich Uncle Pennybags was part of my major donors. But as you probably know, major donors make up the majority of your fundraising for the year. We have something called the 80-20 rule, which is 20% of the donors generate 80% of the revenue for an organization. And that's actually moving a little bit towards 90-10 rule, where 90% of your revenue is made up by 10% of your donors. So major donors are a huge part. For me, I think it's really an important fact that you're talking to your major donors, and you'll need to come up with a way, with a plan to engage with them. Major donors also always want to know what their money is doing, what impact they're having. And I think it's important to talk to them and often ask them how they believe their money is making a difference. And you can do that with phone calls. You can definitely keep them up to date with letters and phone calls and newsletters. But I think if you can have one-to-one meetings with your major donors, I think that's a really beneficial thing to do. And sit down, and quite often when we go, we're so excited about what we're doing that we spend a lot of time talking about our organization and us and we. And I think it is important to engage with them and get them excited and learn about what kind of impact they're wanting to see and what their money is doing. It's a really great place if your board members will get involved with you. As we mentioned, going out and deals is a great way to fundraise. So if you can go out and actually go out with a board member and talk to your major donors, that's a fantastic thing to do. Board members can make calls for you to your major donors just to check in, see how things are going with them. That's another great step to take. So when you're writing your fundraising plan, definitely think about your major donors and how you're going to be talking to them. On the completely opposite end of the spectrum from major donors, there's also things that you can do that are smaller within your organization. I call it informal individual giving. These are things like giving through donation boxes, or when you have your quote free evenings, donations that are given through then. So that's also something. I know it's not a huge part of what you're doing for the year, certainly not to the same extent as your major donors, but it's great to take a look at that and plan for that throughout the year. So what are you going to do with your donation boxes in your informal giving? Do you do free nights? Can you ask for donations instead of calling them free nights? Can you call them by donation evenings? Can you do, when you do events, can you put a donation box out with the food or things like that? So definitely think about the different strategies where you can scrape together a little bit of money through your donation boxes. And that's something to think about and put into the plan as well. Also, to think about when you're going through the tactics and you're trying to think about what your year is going to look like. Are you going to run any appeals or campaigns? And what is that going to be for? I know for us at the Robert Bateman Center, we often do a fall campaign. We raise money for educational bursaries, and we do that through a direct mail piece. So taking a look at, is there a certain project or certain money that needs to be raised for little things? Can you do an appeal or campaign? And this is where your membership fits in, making sure that you have a really solid membership base. You can use those people in the membership base and ask them for to donate to different campaigns and appeals that you might be having. There's so many ways now for you to run an appeal and campaign, and there's lots of information online if you're looking for resources on that. Of course, there's crowdfunding, depending on what you're doing. That's quite popular nowadays. There's the direct mail, as I alluded to. We use that. There's still a fair amount of people who like to give through paper mail. So that's why we use that. But other people do strictly online campaigns as well, or social media campaigns. So find a project that you're wanting to go for throughout the year, set a goal for that, and then look at the different ways that you can approach that kind of campaign.
And Cassie, if I can just jump in here with a question,
Yeah.
what about the suitability of these sorts of campaigns? You know, especially online ones, we see a lot of the viral ad campaigns, that sort of thing. What would the suitability worry be? Do we need this to line up with our mission? Do we need this to line up with our topic? That sort of thing.
I think there's a couple things you really need to look at. You definitely, I would say it should be in line with your vision and mission. I think you need to look at your demographic quite a bit, depending on who's part of your membership base. You know, maybe an online campaign isn't suitable because you have a membership base that's almost all 80-year-olds. So that might not be the right way to go. But it is a great opportunity to capture. And nowadays with online, it's a really a great way to immediately respond to something like what you did with the $5 campaign. I know there were some other organizations and museums throughout BC that jumped on that and said, you know what, McDonald's, don't put your money over there, send it to us at the museum. And the video that the BCMA produced was a really good example of how you can quickly jump on something and try to make a little campaign out of it. So you can do different sizes of campaigns as well. You could have a really small one similar to what the BCMA just did, or you could have something quite large. I know the Royal BC does quite a large campaign for their educational program at the end of the year. So it really depends, but I definitely would try to tie it to what you're doing. I think people like an honesty about an organization. And I think if you go too far outside of what your organization is doing, people will notice that and be like, oh, why are you doing this now? So definitely try to keep it in line with what you're doing. Is there any other questions, Ben, that have come through?
No, that's it.
Okay. Another tactic that you can look at for the year is events. And I will warn you, I have to admit, I have a bias. I'm not the biggest fan of events, especially bigger events, but I think you need to really be careful about when you're doing an event, make sure you do it right and make sure that you're not putting a ton of money in for little return, because events can definitely be time sucks for you. But that being said, there's lots of really great events that you can do that can help either bring in money, raise money, different talks, different lectures, curators tours. And they have the double advantage of also being a stewardship event or a stewardship activity for your members or for your donors as well. So definitely keep in mind when you're writing your plan, if you are going to do some events, and try to look at how you can be the most effective with them. I worked for an organization who did a duck race at a river, and they ended up losing about $40,000 on the event. So it definitely wasn't run properly. So in order, keeping that in mind, just make sure that your events are really tight and you're not putting a ton of work into them. And there's also other events out there. There's some charities that do great events on a bigger scale as well. So be warned of my bias, but definitely take a look at events and how you can include them in the plan. And then the last tactic that I would put into my fundraising plan is sponsorships. And for those of you who were at my table at the BCMA conference, we had the lucky ability to be sitting with Sanjay from the Royal BC Museum, and he does sponsorships over there, and he's just fantastic. And we had quite a discussion about sponsorships and how there's a movement now from sponsorships to what we're calling win-win partnerships. So it's not necessarily all about the return for organizations anymore or people who are sponsoring you. They actually want to be a partner with you and make a difference and have an influence on that way. So you can take a look at sponsorships. Always look at the value of what you're offering for a sponsorship, but also look at what else can be leveraged as well. So maybe an organization wants to give you $10,000 to sponsor an exhibit, which is fantastic, but there are other things that they could also give you that might be just as valuable. They might have a network of clients that you would be able to advertise to or get word out about your exhibit. They might be able to include you in their newsletter. There's other things that they might be able to do that's not just a cash value when it comes to sponsorships. And for me, we always have to be careful about what we're willing to give, because I think sometimes when someone floats some money in front of you, you want to give them the world. And when you're looking at your sponsorships and what you're going to do for the year, really be clear about what you're willing to give someone in a potential sponsorship. Are you willing to give them naming rights over your exhibit? Are you willing to, give them a huge spot in your newsletter? How far are you willing to go, and what's the cost associated with that? So those are the tactics that I would lay out in your fundraising plan. And when you go through your fundraising plan, take a look at each of those different activities and see how they're going to relate to your goals and how you can make up your year of what you're going to do. But there's a couple of things that you also don't want to forget when it comes to your fundraising plan. Is we're doing really well, we're getting all this money from everybody, but what does that mean, and what do we need to do to follow through in order to make sure that our donors and our members are happy? So stewardship and cultivation is an absolute key when it comes to fundraising, and the big take home here is learning how to say thank you and how to do that effectively. I received a phone call actually a couple of days ago from a lady who gave to our annual appeal, and she just called to say thank you to me for writing her a personalized thank you note. For us, we write all of our donations. Everyone gets a handwritten thank you note at the center. And she said that it was the first time in 40 years that she had ever received a thank you note for her level of gifts that she has given. And she also said it was one of the first times she hasn't received an additional ask with her thank you. So for me, the take home was our donors are out there, they're wanting to be thanked. We definitely need to ask them again, but probably not so quick right away. And they want to be recognized. They want to know that their gift is making a difference, and they like the personalized touches. So one of the things you'll see in the document that I'm passing off to you is an example of a stewardship plan. And that can be part of your fundraising plan. I think it's very important to lay out how you're going to thank your donors when they're giving to you, and know everybody who's involved in that. So if you receive a donation under $100, what does that look like? What's the process? How will people get their tax receipt? What kind of thank you is going along with that? The other thing that you can add to your stewardship plan is a bit of cultivation as well. There's going to be a lot of new donors that you get if you're running a membership program or a donor program through your organization. How can you keep them? What's going to inform them about what you're doing and get them excited about your organization, and possibly get them thinking about giving to you again in the future? Maybe giving you a bequest down the road. So think about a cultivation plan too. How are the ways that you're going to talk to these people? Are you going to use a newsletter format? Are you going to make random phone calls? Are you going to recognize your members when they come into to your organization and have a conversation with them? Think about the different ways that you can talk to people and get them excited. And also think about the ways that they can talk to you. Is there a way that they can give you valuable information back about what you're doing? Can you send out a survey? Things like that. So definitely think about the tactics when you're putting together your fundraising plan and what you're going to be doing, but also think about the next steps down the road as well when it comes to your stewardship and cultivation. That's really going to be how you retain your people. For memberships, I know the industry standard is about 50% of your members will renew and 50% will not. So think about how you can increase that number up to maybe 60% and keep people excited and involved in your organization. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on is very similar to recognition as well. And it is, it's similar to stewardship and cultivation. They go hand in hand. It's recognition. And a lot of donors, especially the major donors out there, do want to be recognized. And that can be part of your fundraising plan as well. Deciding how we're going to recognize our donors. This is a beautiful donor wall from the Buffalo State Science and Mathematics Complex that I found online. It's gorgeous. But how are the ways, if you don't have room to do that, how are the ways that you're going to recognize people? Can you do a donor profile in your newsletter? Do you have a donor wall? Do you have listings on your website? In doing that, make sure that you have permission to publish people's names and let people know that they're a donor of yours. But definitely make sure that you're stewarding, you're cultivating, and you're recognizing the people that are involved. So we're have about 15 minutes or so for questions. I just wanted to summarize, just definitely if you have any questions of me, feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call at the Bateman Foundation. I'm more than happy to help out. And as Ben will be sending out our fundraising plan template, and as you go along through, if you do have any questions, let me know, and be creative. Get out there and find different ways that you can ask people for money. I think we're all going to have a great 2018.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. And I'll, if it's okay with you, Cassie, I'll include that email and contact information in the email out to everybody else. Is that cool?
You bet. Absolutely. That's no problem at all.
Perfect. Well, why don't we switch over to our questions now? And if anybody has any questions, feel free to use the chat function. That's the instructions on how to get it. Most people, I think, have been able to get it pretty easily. So while they're going and typing in their questions, Cassie, I had one question for you.
Yeah.
Came in earlier from the Qualicum Beach Museum. How can we tap into those beyond our existing supporters and sort of focus on increasing membership? And I think that ties into your whole 50% don't renew. So how do you get 50% new ones as well?
Absolutely. There's lots of different ways that you can tell, and Qualicum Beach is a really great community. So there's always, whenever we go to do a membership drive, we'll actually try to do a little press release and get some earned media on that. So if you know somebody involved in the media up there, try to get their attention out there, which is great. You can do a lot of outreach. I know my fundraising career started for the Land Conservancy, and I was sent to different sites to actually talk to people about membership. So I spent many days at the Abkhazia Gardens and the Sioux Potholes talking to visitors there about their memberships, and definitely incorporate it into everything that you're doing. So your newsletters, if you can try to, for us, a big boon this year is we have quite a large number of people on our newsletter list, but we haven't been able to convert them into members yet. And we finally this year, I think, got our messaging correct and got people excited, and we were able to take quite a few of those people on our newsletter list and convert them into membership. So definitely integrate it in as much as you can. Signage always works. There's a lot of museums have a sign as you're leaving the door that says, did you have a great time today? Become a member. We often offer people who have paid for an admission ticket. We'll actually put the cost of that admission ticket towards a membership, so it's easy for them to convert, and really talk about it. My friends hate me because I'm constantly talking about membership. So I'm constantly out there talking about my organization, and the first thing is when somebody gets excited about it is, if you're excited about the organization, the best way you can support it is to become a member.
As one of Cassie's friends, I can say that is true. She does talk about it a lot, which is great. Anybody typing in questions? We'll give you a couple minutes to get your typing in. Is there anything else that you'd want to highlight, Cassie, that you think would be an important thing for people to know, or something that they should pay attention to this year in particular?
I think really, I alluded to it when we were talking in the actual presentation. There is we're starting to see some differences when it comes to different generations giving, and different generations give in different ways. So there's a lot of information out there that you can Google. There's lots of resources. There's Pursuant and Blackbaud, and they all produce information. But there's different types of people, like millennials versus Generation X's versus boomers, are all going to give a little different to your organization. So it's never a bad thing to talk differently to people. But keep in mind who your demographic is. For us, our demographic is probably a woman 55 plus. So we need to make it easy for her to give. We need to know the way that she gives, which tends to be a certain way, either online or on paper, and we need to make that happen. So.
Okay. Well, and we've just gotten a few questions in here, so let's try to go through these quick. So from Allison at the BC Sports Hall of Fame, what is a standard rate of growth we should be aiming for in a general fundraising campaign? And you mentioned realistic goals. So what would those sort of be?
Absolutely. It really depends on your organization, but I think you really need to take a look at your stats. I'm a big person at data about data. So what I would do, Allison, is take a look at what your rate of growth has been over the last couple of years and see if you can match it. I think quite often 10 to 20% is a really good rate of growth. If you're not going backwards, that's also a very good thing. And so I would keep it realistic. I wouldn't go, 50%, 100%. That's really going to be unrealistic for you. So I would go about 10 to 20.
Okay. I don't know if this was a question from Linda or not, but it might have been an answer to what we were talking about as well. But describe the components of a brief case for support. In her experience, these are quite long. So
they can be quite long. I'm a big fan of the one pager for a case for support. You can have an internal document that's quite a bit longer that kind of lists things out. But for me, I need to have something that I can take into a donor and be able to talk with and not overwhelm them. So if you can put a case for support in that's a page double-sided, really graphic and beautiful to look at, I think that always helps. And know that you don't need to put in everything. I know that a case for support can stand on its own, but most often you're going to be going out to somebody with it, so you're going to be able to have a conversation about it. So definitely put the mission and vision of the organization as well. What kind of impact you're making on the community, your programs that you're having, and if you can do that in a one pager, that would be perfect.
Going back to our questions about boards, so Gabriel from Vernon writes in, where do boards have the most success with fundraising as opposed to staff?
Oh, good question. I think there's something really exciting about bringing a board member along. If I go into an ask, the donor's going to know that this is my job. quite frankly, I'm a fundraiser. This is my job. But if I bring a board member with me, that board member is a volunteer and they're doing it for the goodness, because they like the organization, because they believe in the organization. So for me, that's the power of a board ask. This is a volunteer who is not being paid to be here, who can go out and really believes in the organization and is able to make an ask. So I think that's where you find the success is having a staff member that can speak to all of the nitty-gritty details about the organization, but then having that board member who has the support and the hope and the love of the organization.
Cool. Laura, I think Laura's writing in from Revelstoke, which is a great town in BC.
Awesome.
Laura writes in saying, how can you be sure to not oversaturate members of the local community with your asks for donations, community events, memberships, all that sort of thing? So how do you not oversaturate?
That is a really good question, because you can, and it definitely in some of the smaller communities there can be some weary donors out there. So I think that's where it's important to talk to your donors, and I think it's the balance. It was similar to the article that I read in the Know Your Bone. As I mentioned, the members were tired that they were constantly being asked for money and not being recognized when they showed up to their institutions. So it's the balance between making sure, yes, you need to ask, and maybe you're not asking every week. That's a bit too much. Every 6 weeks is kind of high, but seems to be the standard. but also making sure that they're getting something out of it too, that they're getting recognized, that they're being told what they're doing. For me, I tend to spend a lot of time with my members' e-news talking about the impact that the membership is making, but not making an ask. So that when we come around the 2 times a year, I do make a blatant ask to them. They know that they're making a difference. They know they're having an impact. They know they're making these programs happen, and they're prepared to respond to that ask.
Right. And then our next one here from Ben, who's here in Victoria. Ben says, what is the appropriate value of thank you per dollar of donation? So what value of perk should be offered for a donation of 50, 100, 500, etc.? And to what value is a single thank you acceptable?
You have to be really careful when it comes to giving things in exchange for donations. So I believe you can look it up online, but I believe CRA regulations say you cannot give more than, I think it's between 3 and 5% of value back without you having to do a split receipt, without you actually having to take money off of a tax receipt. So you'll have to take a look into that, and then you have to be careful as well. I know some donors do grow weary of. I think we've all probably, and no offense to the SPCA, but we've all received our address labels from the SPCA. People do grow tired of that, so finding out what a request is, what a preference is key, and then also, just figuring out what you're capable of. Our organization right now is capable of writing all hand thank yous. So we just give a thank you card and their tax receipt, and that seems to go a long way. You can have your volunteers write the thank yous. You can have your board members write the thank yous. So it really depends. For us, if it's a donation under $100, they get a handwritten thank you. If it's between 100 and 500, they get a phone call from me and a handwritten thank you. If it's above $10,000, they get a phone call from Robert Bateman and a thank you that way. So it's just kind of lining out, looking at the resources that you have, and putting them into place. And it doesn't always need to be stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of this somewhat relates to our fascination with Kickstarter now, or Indiegogo, where when you fund something or get something started, you get a something back in return. And I think a lot of us focus on that now, of sort of what's my level of perk, right? So
exactly.
Do you think that that's also influencing how people are wanting to donate as well? They're wanting to do it because there is something back?
Definitely, and it really talks to, I mentioned the generational giving and how different generations give nowadays. The millennials are definitely into getting something back from what I've read. They're the ones who are, if you have an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign, the main people on your donor list are going to be millennials. Whereas Gen Xers are a little bit different. They don't do that as much. Boomers, I don't believe, do it very much at all. So it really it speaks to your and it speaks to your project as well. If you have a really cool, maybe project that looks like it would be a good fit with the millennials, then you'll have to design a campaign that's going to talk to them, and it's going to be mostly social media based, and maybe there'll be perks because that's the way they like to give, versus something more traditional. You might be able to go a different approach at.
Right. Okay, well, we've got 2 more questions for you. Okay. So Jennifer asks, is there a cost-benefit ratio to try to achieve regarding fundraising off the side of an existing staff's desk versus investing in hiring a dedicated fundraising staff member?
Yeah, it really it really again depends on your organization and depends on what you're trying to look for. For me, I was brought into the Robert Bateman Center. They made the commitment that they wanted to really increase their grants and memberships, and they knew that it would take a couple years to do that, but they wanted to invest in that. So it really depends on really what you're looking to achieve. Other organizations do just fine with somebody off the side of their desk. So not really answering your question there, but it really just depends on your organization. I don't really have an actual ratio, but you can look up certain things. Some people believe that a fundraiser should bring in about 10 times their salary in each year. Other organizations will go less, other organizations will go more than that.
And Jennifer, it may depend on what you're doing. I know that there are some organizations around town that have started big capital campaigns for buildings and have brought somebody in for a period of time specifically related to that as well. So it sort of depends, I think. But great question. And then let's end on something from Kate from White Rock. She says, Cassie, what is the Bateman Center's most successful fundraising angle?
Like everybody else, it's our major donors. it's keeping those major donors happy, and we were lucky enough to have to start with a really good base of them. But it's the strategy to keep them involved and engaged, and they're our bread and butter. The other side of that is memberships. We're starting to see a return on our memberships. So we've slowly built up our membership base, and we're now starting to see them support us in different ways, give us donations, that sort of thing as well.
Perfect. And Cassie has mentioned Colleen Dillenschneider a couple times through this presentation, so we'll try to find a link to that one article and send that out as well. It's a really useful blog. We use it at the BCMA here, and lots of people are always referencing it, so we'll send that around to you as a resource as well. And so thank you very much, Cassie. That's all the time we have for this month. We have hit our 1 o'clock deadline, so perfect way to start 2018. I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation, and if you have any further questions, we can definitely get those to Cassie either through her email or through me. If you do have any questions, my email is on the screen right now, and I'll be sending out an email shortly with some follow-up information and a quick survey that we do after every webinar. I really appreciate it if you take a few minutes to fill that out for me. It helps us plan for the year ahead. And remember that you can see this webinar in our webinar archive, so you will get a link and password for the recording in that email too. It should come by the end of the day. Now next month, and are you ready for this, because this is big news, we have the man and the legend himself, Tim Willis, joining us. If you don't know Tim, he is possibly one of the best known museum people, museum characters in BC, if not in Western Canada, if not the world. And we will have him join us to teach you how to plan a successful exhibition, bringing in examples from around the world of what to do and, of course, what not to do. So join us February 20th for that. Tickets are already going quickly. So make sure you sign up for that. And don't forget, you can also propose your own webinar for 2018. We still have some slots left, and we'd love to have you join us as a presenter. We're particularly looking for topics about collections, conservation, maybe some board governance or collaboration, and you can propose your webinar using the form on our website. You find it under the Professional Development tab. So I will include all that information again in that follow-up email coming to you in a couple hours once we get the recording online. So thank you very much, Cassie, and thanks to everybody for signing in, especially those coming from across the border, and we will see you next month.